Coco out of her spell, and she gazed around, uncertain as to her whereabouts. The darkness was oppressive, and the little girl felt fear clench at her chest as she looked all around her. Just then, the butterfly flew close and perched carefully on Coco's shoulder, as if it could sense her fright. Coco crowed with delight to see how close the beautiful creature was. As she raised her hand to capture it, the butterfly flew gently ahead, and Coco was captivated once again. She followed the butterfly until it stopped in the middle of a clearing and perched on the large knot of a fallen tree covered in moss. The butterfly's beautiful wings fluttered ever so slowly. Coco sat next to the butterfly, staring at its delicate wings. Now she could see that they weren't jewel-studded. Instead, small drops of dew seemed to be caught up all along the outline of its wings, which were shot through with silvery veins like cobwebs. It was still the most beautiful thing Coco had ever seen. She wanted to touch it. She wanted to hold it in her hands. As she reached for the butterfly, something tapped on her leg. Coco looked down and gasped. Hundreds of tiny green creatures surrounded her. For a moment, she thought they were plants, but as she looked closer, she saw they had alien faces and small leaf-shaped hands with which they were now poking her gently. Coco sat absolutely still, too scared to scream or move. The little creatures pressed closer, whispering in a strange little language that sounded like the rustling of leaves. "Who are you? What do you want?" Coco asked, trying not to cry. One small creature came closer, a tiny humming sound emanating from it, almost like the purr of a kitten. In its little leaf hand, it held a small, orange-colored persimmon. It climbed onto Coco's lap and held out the tiny fruit. With a shaking hand, Coco accepted. "Thank you," she said. Looking down at the fruit, she found it was a perfectly formed persimmon, except that it was no bigger than a grape. The creature purred again. It pantomimed, lifting its hand to its small mouth. Coco didn't want to offend it, but she'd been taught to be careful of the unknown. How did she know that the fruit wasn't poisonous? How did she know that these creatures weren't dangerous? The princess cautiously observed the tiny green folk surrounding her. Suddenly, she knew with absolute certainty that they would never hurt her. She popped the fruit into her mouth, and immediately a sweet explosion of flavor overwhelmed her. "Oh, my goodness!" Coco smiled. "That was delicious! May I have some more, please?" Excited, several of the creatures pressed more fruit into her hands, and Coco felt her fear dissipate as she sat and played with her new friends. Before long, she was chatting with them and learning their strange whispering language. She learned that they were called Namushin, spirits of the Kidahara trees, and that they were so happy she was safely back home with them. "But this is not my home," Coco replied in confusion. "I've never been here before." The Namushin rushed to tell her a wondrous story about a time long, long ago, when dragons soared the skies above them and magical creatures roamed the lands in peace. Hours passed, but Coco knew nothing of time. She never heard the frantic cries of her parents as they searched for her. She didn't hear the baying of the search dogs that circled the perimeter, but could never quite find her. Secure in the company of her new friends, the princess followed the Namushin into the hollow of an ancient tree and disappeared. Chapter 2. 5 years later.
The king cannot be allowed to stand in the way of progress any more. The railway must be built and connect us to our neighbors so that we can trade without fear of bandits and monsters. And the ban on mining...